Is this the last stand? Larry Fink says this could be the end of globalization. I mean, look around. Look what's going on with the Russia-Ukraine war. We're going to cover what the sanctions mean. We're going to cover what China betting on Russia means. And we're going to talk about the almighty dollar that we hold so valuable. Is it the end? I'm Chris Naugle, and this is What Now? What's next? Let's get into it. So let's get into this. Right now, you all know there's a Russia-Ukraine war going on. You may also know that China is backing Russia. Silently, but they're still taking sides with Russia. And the US, just like I said in the prior video, is putting sanctions on Russia. We are blocking Russia. Okay, we are not allowing Russia to invest in our markets. We're not buying oil anymore. NATO actually said we're no longer going to buy oil. Now, there was a wind down of that because there was existing orders that the U.S. government is allowing companies to fulfill. But in about 45 days from today, the U.S. and many of the NATO countries will not buy oil from Russia. Not only that, we are freezing assets. That's another sanction. We are freezing assets of some of the oligarchs. We are trying to cut off Russia's ability to do business with the rest of the world. And in other periods of time in history, World War I, World War II, so many of the other crises that have happened, we have done the exact same things. But at what point do other countries stand up and say, no more, we're not going to do it? Well, that could be where we're at. This might very well be the end of globalization as we know it. But this also might be the end of the Federal Reserve's most valuable product, their most protected product, and it is this, the US dollar. The US dollar used to be backed by gold until Nixon put an end to that. Actually, that wasn't the first time, because back in the 1930s, during the Great Depression, they also banned gold then. So this isn't a new thing, but now, what gives the US dollar value? I will tell you the single thing that gives the US dollar value is that it is the reserve currency, the currency in which oil is traded in. And because oil, black gold, is traded in the US dollar, valued in the US dollar, it ultimately gives the US dollar an untouchable feel and an untouchable value, because oil is something we all need. Until the oil-producing nations decide that the US dollar isn't going to be the currency that they're going to value oil in, which you are seeing happen right now. You are starting to see the cracks in the system, the cracks in the US dollar, and that absolutely will mark the end of globalization. But let me go back for just a second. Let me just take you back and talk a little bit more about the sanctions. The sanctions we're talking about are asset freezes and seizures, okay, blockades and blocking capital market access, and also embargoes, all of which the US has already put on Russia. And at a certain point in time, if you were Russia or Putin, you would just say, screw it. We're no longer going to play these games. And anybody that's behind Russia, maybe India, maybe China, and several others, would probably say the same thing. Because how many of you would like it if somebody just flipped a switch on you and said, you no longer can buy groceries, you no longer can buy fuel for your car, you no longer can buy this, that, and another thing? Well, that's what the US just did to Russia. And Russia doesn't like it. Putin said, I'm done with this. So what does that mean? That means they're going to find other ways to do things. If the US dollar is what oil is traded in, and the US dollar is the reserve currency, what is it going to take to knock the US dollar down? So because of all this, Russia and China may want to start trading oil in their currency, the ruble or the yen. And what would that mean? Well, that would take away a lot of value from the US dollar, wouldn't it? So what do we mean when we talk about globalization? Well, when other countries have sanctions put on them, they get upset and they start talking amongst themselves and they start thinking, hey guys and gals, should we just not play this game anymore? Because that's what I would do. If I was in Putin's shoes, which I never would be, but if I was, I would find workarounds. That could be in the form of digital currencies. Do you all know that China has been doing a beta test on a digital currency in many of their cities, trying to create their own digital currency, which is still controlled by China, but not part of this whole NATO and US dollar reserve currency. If that works, do you think Russia might start doing that? Matter of fact, there's already talk of Russia doing that. And there's talk of Russia, whether this is real or not, going back on the gold standard. Do you all know what that would mean? That would give Russia and its currency unbelievable power because it actually has a tangible asset backing it. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. I'm simply trying to explain that if somebody took your ability to buy things, trade things, sell things away, you would find a workaround. You would pivot. And that's exactly what Russia's doing. That's exactly what China's doing. That's exactly what India is probably going to do in many other countries. And if it works there, it might be adopted amongst many others. But you still have to stand up against the US because the Federal Reserve, not connected with the US government, but intertwined, the Federal Reserve's #1 product is the US dollar. They have an unlimited printing press for this dollar. They can make as much of it as they want. They can control it. They can do everything with that as long as their #1 product is in demand. As long as their #1 product, the US dollar, is what oil is traded in, because that's where the value comes from. But once that value is diminished, and that value is being diminished and has been being diminished for quite a long time, but specifically since 2008. When they print trillions of dollars of this, which ultimately devalues this dollar. So let me show you what I mean. Here's a $100 bill. If we go back in history to 1913 when the Fed was created, $100 had purchasing power of $100. That just makes sense, right? But over time, because of printing and because of the way that the economic machine has been used, this $100 has lost purchasing power. In just 1923, 10 years after the Fed was created, that same 100 only had a value of $57 and some change. And as we keep walking through the Great Depression, it went up a little and had $76 worth of purchasing power. But let's fast forward down here. In the 1970s and the 1980s, when we had runaway inflation, many of you might be too young to remember this, but that was when there was lines at the gas pumps, people's dollars were going down, 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 and inflation was going up, up, up. That's back when you could earn double digits by having money in a savings account or CDs. Some of your grandparents, maybe even your parents, remember these times. That was inflation. During those periods of time, the US dollar, $100, only had a purchasing power of $22, and then as low as 9.94 cents in the 80s. Folks, history is repeating itself right now. Fast forward, 2019, the purchasing power of $100 was only $3.87. And that was 2019. That was before the Fed decided to print over $5 trillion because of the pandemic. And that was before the Fed and the US government adopted the new economic theory called modern monetary theory. That theory says we'll just print our way out. And as you print more of these, you devalue more of the purchasing power, which is a good thing for the government because the government has lots of debt that they want to pay back with weaker dollars. If you had $100, wouldn't you want to pay back debt at only $3 of purchasing power? Of course. Well, if you could get that 3 down to 1 or 0, wouldn't that make sense? Yeah, but that can't happen, right? Well, it can't really happen the way that it is now, but what the US could do is adopt their own digital dollar. Then they control everything. Then it wouldn't matter because you'd never have inflation because they would control every aspect of everything we buy, everything we sell, every transfer we make, and every single thing we do that needs money. And folks, money is nothing more than a means of exchange. Money for food, food for money. Money for house, house for money. Money for car, car for money. Money is just a means of exchange. That's all it is. Whether it's the dollar, the yen, the ruble, gold back in the day, or what might be coming, which is the digital dollar. Now, you'll notice I did not say Bitcoin. There is no way the US or any country is going to adopt Bitcoin. Why? The exact reason why we love Bitcoin. It is decentralized. No government in the world wants a decentralized dollar or a decentralized money, they all want control, which means it has to be centralized and it has to be controlled by the central banks. And that is exactly what they will do. And when they do that, it's hard to say whether or not they make this, your paper dollars, illegal like they did gold, or whether they allow the two to exist, which to me doesn't make sense. I think what they're going to do is they're going to say, nope, your dollars have to be exchanged for digital dollars. I think they will do away with what we know of the US dollar. And they will adopt the digital currency, which will then begin to unwind everything, because there goes globalization. Unless you can get every country in the world to adopt this new digital currency, you've now created another problem. You've created some solutions to some problems and some major hurdles that I don't think we'll ever get over. This is the beginning of the end. This is the last stand, folks. The last stand means the end of globalization, just like Larry Fink talked about. But you see, this isn't the last time this has happened. But this is probably the one that's top of mind for you, the ruble, which is Russia's means of exchange. It's their dollar. Since the West, let's call it the US, put sanctions on Russia, the ruble is worth less than 1 penny. It has lost nearly 50% of its value because of sanctions. So if you were the citizens, if you were Putin, if you were the leadership, wouldn't you have to find another way to trade? Another way to use money, another way to buy things? Well, you would. You'd be forced to on a global scale. Now, we're never going to get away from globalization. There will never probably come a day where each country uses all their own production to produce everything that they need. It can't happen. Wheat is one of the biggest things we import from Russia and Ukraine. Okay? Oil is another thing. Russia produced a lot of the oil that we import. We no longer are importing oil. Have you seen the gas pumps? Out in California, we were just there for an event. Gas was over $7. Over $7 a gallon. Why is that? Well, partly because supply and demand. We're no longer buying oil from Russia. Then we're going around scrambling, trying to get the other countries that produce oil, the Saudis and everybody else, to give us more of their oil, which drives up demand, which also drives up price. You see, it's a double-edged sword, folks. You put sanctions on one, it hurts all, until somebody says enough. China, one of the biggest threats, not so much Russia, but China, certainly has the ability to put the stop to all of this. And I bet you any money, this is just my speculation, I'm not making predictions, I'm just thinking logically, China will do that. I already said they're testing a digital currency right now. If that works, it will start being adopted. If that works, other countries will start doing the same thing, which will then create new means of exchange within their country, which will not be adopted outside until we all come to a common ground. And I just don't see that happening with the US and China. You know what I'm seeing? Another war. A world war. World War III to be specific. And I think China is going to be a part of that. But you see, wars in today's world, outside of Russia, Ukraine, aren't always done with bombs and military and guns. Wars sometimes are fought with things like this, your computer. And you're seeing that happen in Ukraine and Russia right now. Hackers going in, shutting down systems. Russia having to put firewalls on all things. So anybody in Russia, the only internet and only platforms they can use are ones that work in Russia, because they're trying to protect that. Folks, this is just the beginning. Globalization, how we've lived, how we've seen trade go on between different countries very well might change in the next few years. In the next decade, we might not even remember how we used to do business. The things we value today, the things that we literally take for granted today, might be things in the future that people kill for. That's a scary thought. And I don't want to put that bad vibe out there, but you know what? We really need to start looking at what's happening. We need to start looking at how we do business, and we need to look at how we invest. If all your eggs are in one basket, the US dollar, then I think you're making mistakes. I think you'd be a fool to not diversify and start buying additional means of currency, additional means of exchange. So, how would you do that? Well, Maybe you'd bulk up on gold and silver and other precious metals, which then, just like they have in the past, could be used as a barter. They can't be used as a means of exchange because obviously there's no way the US government's going to allow that. But we could do it on the underground. We could exchange gold coins. We could do that in a barter system. What else? Cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. Okay, that would be the one that I would put my emphasis on. Although I think Bitcoin might see another run up right now like it is, and then it's going to see a steep decline with the markets. I think Bitcoin will be around, but always on a black market type of use. And until those exchanges expand, until more and more people adopt Bitcoin as a means of exchange underground, because again, US government's never going to adopt that, I think that is still going to be a difficult proposition. Heck, you used to be able to buy a Tesla with Bitcoin, then you couldn't, and now maybe you can. Is that where you want your currency? No. But it is one place that you should be dabbling. What else? Well, maybe you should go to other currencies and start bulking up on them. The euro, the yen, the ruble. Good luck buying the ruble. I tried, you can't get it right now, but eventually you'll be able to. You might want to bulk up on diversifying your money. And I don't just mean the dollar, I mean all monies, so that when this does happen, no matter who comes out on top or who comes out higher than they are now, you've got a little skin in the game. That would be a very smart place for you to go. So let's just go back and recap. The sanctions that the US and NATO put on Russia cut off Russia's ability to sell oil to many of these countries, cut off Russia's ability to do trade with many of these other countries, cut off Russia's ability to do a lot of the things that they used to do using US or European different exchanges. Now they can't. And the US froze lots of assets. That pisses people off. Because of that, they're finding other means. They're pivoting. They're finding other ways to exchange, other ways to trade, and other countries to do business with. I've heard that Russia is upped their oil production for China. I've heard that Russia is also producing more oil for India. How much more? I don't know. Is it enough to support the amount that the US and NATO countries used to buy? Probably not. Not only that, is the US and other NATO countries going to be okay if they can't buy oil and wheat from Russia? Because you know, it's a two-way swinging door. If we cut them off and we stop buying their oil, are they going to stop sending their wheat over here? Are we all going to have a problem at the grocery store where we literally have no food to buy? Right now, you've all seen the impact of supply and demand problems. You've seen that. You've seen less food on the shelves. You've gone into the grocery stores when a lot of the shelves are bare. You've ordered things that used to happen in a week that now take months to get. What if that was the norm? What if food literally was something you had to wait days and weeks just to get? What if there was long lines just to get a loaf of bread? Oh, you don't think that's possible because we live in the United States of America? Well, every empire has a rise and a fall. We all might see that fall. And the question is, are you ready? The question is, do you see the writing on the wall? Are you burying your head in the sand, hoping and praying that this is all just going to go away? If that's you, you have much to learn, because history will repeat itself, and we are writing the future as we go right now. I always say, it's better to drive your car looking out the front windshield, even if you don't like what you see, versus driving your car staring in the rear view mirror, and too many of you are literally staring in that rear view mirror, looking at what happened in the past, and then hoping that you're not going to run into a brick wall. You're doing that with your investing. You're investing because in the past year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, you've made a bunch of money. That doesn't mean anything for the future. The past does not tell the whole story of what's going to happen in the future. If you're hoping and praying that your invested assets are going to keep going up, well, I got some bad news for you. All the things we're seeing, all the things I just talked about are not going to be good for the stock market. They are not going to be good for your real estate investments, because all of them, right now, they're inflating in price and going up, which you love, and it makes you feel rich. But pretty soon, they're going to deflate. They're going to devalue. You're already seeing the signs. We're at the top, folks. Matter of fact, we're not even at the top. We're on our way back down the other side. You're just not paying attention. All these things we just talked about today should be warning signs for you to start taking action. We just talked about currency and dollars and money. But what about your stocks, your bonds, your mutual funds? What about all that real estate that you've been buying, just like everybody back in 2006 was, because it's going up and up and up and you think it's never going to end? Well, it will. And it will go back down. Listen, there's a lot of people like me and others that I surround myself with that are just sitting waiting. We're waiting for the asset values to drop in price so that we can actually start deploying some of the capital. But you have been tricked to believe that because your dollars are losing value to inflation, that you got to rush in and take risky assets down. You got to buy more risky assets because, oh my God, inflation's almost 8%. I got to make 9% just to beat inflation, which you're true, you do. But does the risk outweigh the reward, or does the reward justify the risk? That's up to you to decide. For me, the risk absolutely outweighs any reward I will get from buying real estate, from buying stocks, from buying just about any asset long term. You see, sometimes we just have to be patient, sit back and wait, and everything we want will appear in front of us. But most of you are buying into FOMO, the fear of missing out. You think you're missing out on something. You think you have to rush and do something. That feeling will get you in a lot of trouble. That feeling will allow your money to flee you in the near future. So folks, are you ready? Are you ready for what's coming? Are you ready for the end of globalization? And are you ready to take the last stand? This is What Now? What's Next? I hope you enjoyed it.